One thing I like to start talking about first is the conditions in the car itself. And by that I mean the environment. We're talking about heat in the summer, cold in the winter, the dust, the dirt, all of that. So anything that you have to say or remember about what it was like physically to actually be in that car, I would love to hear.
You almost said it right there. Cold in the winter and hot in the summer. I think, well, I don't want to go ahead, but the first thing was if your car was sitting in the summer sun for 3 or 4 hours before you even went to work, you just walked into a sauna bath. You know, that was number one. And then you change your clothes. You don't know why you're changing because you were just as wet before and after. So that was the summer. In the winter, you probably started off warm. It depends on the steam, and you know, actually I rode in the steam engines too, and it depended on how much steam you got. But there were some cold ones, there's no question, you know. But we survived, you know. Iron Men and what was it? Iron Men and wooden cars.
Well, I remember right down in the bottom of Union Station, about 4 hours every morning. Let's see, I went to work about 4 o'clock in the morning. And of course, in the bottom of Union Station, there's no air stirring, so it was very hot. We worked about 4 hours in the station, and then the train left here at 8 o'clock. That was Washington Brisk 45. And I'd like to correct you about one thing. We never called it D.C. and Brisk. It was always Washington Brisk and Washington Charlotte, Washington whatever.
Good point.
But yeah, it was hot and stagnant for the most part. But it was much better after the train got out of the station and moving. And in the wintertime, I can remember some runs that there was ice in the floor. I don't know why, but you know, that did happen. And a couple of times I remember the train was going up Christiansburg Mountain, and the snow was so deep the train had to stall. It didn't make it over the mountain. They had to back up and give another run at it. So it was sometimes unbearable, but for the most part, it was okay. No air condition, of course.
And Gayle?
I remember one morning going to work 20 below zero. The floor was so cold, your feet almost froze until you got a pouch or a sack, then you stood on that. Then it was warm after you insulated it. But going to work in Union Station at 7 o'clock at night, after the car had been sitting in the sun all day long, was very unbearable. And just in June, July, and August.
And talk about the dust and the dirt. What was that? Because I think most people, when they think of mail, they think of their piece of their letter, which is actually quite clean.
Yes.
So you don't associate mail with being dusty and dirty.
It was very bad with the steam engines. Leaving Union Station, and you go into a tunnel before you ever saw daylight, and serving local with the steam and coal dust hitting you in the face. And also in the wintertime, you're going 60 or 70 miles an hour, and it's below zero. It's not exactly very warm out there.
Aubrey or Bill?
Well, I was just saying, you know, maybe the mail was clean, but the sacks were dirty, the dust was there, and the mail cars didn't get the good housekeeping seal of approval, I'll guarantee you. And we used twine, which was very dusty at the time, you know. And every time you wrapped up a letter or a package, you know, you'd be tearing that twine up, and it gets quite a little dusty in there. And then earlier, if you want to go back early, when they had the steam engines, now you're talking about dirt. when they let those cinders go, you had dirt.
Aubrey, any memories about dust and dirt?
Well, yes, it was dirty because all the mail sacks were pretty bad, pretty dirty. And I think the train itself kicked up a lot of dust as it went along. And I'm thinking about when you catch your mail on the run, you had to stick your head out the window and watch for where the mailbag is hanging. And a lot of times you would get dust in your eyes, but we was always supposed to wear eye goggles. Of course, I didn't wear any until I got speck in my eye and had to have it removed, but that was always a problem, yeah. Dust and dirt was a problem.
Go ahead.
I started out on a small line called the Virginia Creeper, ran out of Abingdon, Virginia. It did not have any steam heat. It was a mixed train. All you had in the wintertime, you had a stove. And so it's either very hot or very cool with a stove. In a 15-foot car, you did not have much room.
Tell me a little bit about, I know you'd bring your work clothes with you to change into, so that everything that got dirty that day, you might be able to change back out. If you brought that in, that was part of your grip or part of the bag that you brought with you. What else did you bring with you for a day's work on the train, or for a week's work, or however long you were on that time?
What did we bring with us?
What did you bring with you?
Well, you had to have slips, your pouch label, your slips, your headers. Each one had their own headers.
And Bill, tell them what slips are. Slips. Tell them what slips are.
Well, what the slips are? That was in fact, I got...
It's not something you wear.
No. I got one. You put your name on each slip, and if there was something wrong, they had your name. So we had to carry them. You had to punch them out. And you had to... It'd be nice to have a couple of changes of clothes, a T-shirt, especially in the summer or something, And food helps. That was very important, because there was no McDonald's on the way.
Anything else you'd bring with you in the grip?
Snacks, lunch, something to eat, yes. For the most part, my career in the railway mail service was a short stop run from Lynchburg, Virginia to Washington and back the next morning. So I didn't have to bring a change of clothes, and so I just wore the same thing for one trip. So I didn't have that problem.
Well, I'll tell the story of a fellow, I will not mention his name. They had a dance in Bristol on Saturday night, and this fellow came back home, and his wife, for some reason, was suspicious. So she said, "I'm going to unpack your suitcase." She opened it up. He had a tuxedo in his suitcase. He had a lot of explaining to do.
Imagine so. Other things that you might have brought in, let's say, did you also have your badge, your identification? Did you all have the gun that you had to carry?
Well, yeah, they didn't even think of those things. That's kind of automatic.
Okay.
I mean, the badge, the gun. Yeah, we had those.
Yeah.
I was issued a badge and gun. I was 17 years old. I turned 17. And I retired at 57. I had 42 years service, counting sick leave and everything.
You must have been one of the youngest ones hired. 17.
Well,
Yeah.
17 years and 2 months.
Did you all start out as substitutes?
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Did you all start as substitutes, as subs?
Oh, yeah, I was a sub. I don't know about them, but I was a sub, yeah.
For a long time, yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
What would you say the worst thing about being a sub was?
Very simple. You worked June, July, and August, and part of September, and then starved to death in the winter. So you didn't get a day off in July and August, really. Well, it was good because you had to make the money, because you weren't going to make nothing in January and February, unless some of you took off sick or something, because not too many went to Florida at those times. People weren't taking Florida vacations. So that was one of the big parts. Another part was you never knew. You thought you had the next day off, and you come in, the transfer clerk could give you an order saying you're going out again tomorrow night, or I don't want to tell you what I said.
Aubrey, Gayle, worst thing about being, or best thing about being a sub?
Oh.
Well, you did not, after Christmas, sometimes you can go 2 or 3 months without getting any work at all, very, very little. I was, another fellow and I hadn't had any work. We came to see the superintendent. It was actually in this building. And I told him we weren't getting any work, and had some guys down at our hometown, and he didn't believe us, and he jerked the phone off the long call and found out it was true. We got home, we had work scheduled for us.
Oh, well, I was lucky in this regard because I was hired on as a regular. Excuse me.
Sorry, we have to fly.
I was postal clerk in Lynchburg, Virginia for 4 years, and I was still 4th on the substitute list. And this job was posted in the Lynchburg post office because they wanted somebody out of Lynchburg, and it was a regular job, so I wanted to go regular, and so I applied for it, and lucky enough I got it. So I was well pleased with that.
Let's talk a little bit about the schedule. Your schedules as RPO clerks were a bit odd for folks in most work. Well, you know, 9 to 5, 5 days a week type of thing, versus yours, which were many, many days on, many, many days off at a time. How did that schedule fly with your families or your wives?
Well, our wives mostly raised their kids, and mine was 4 on and 5 off, 4 on and 7 off on some jobs. Some of them were 6 on and 8 off, and every 10th week you got one of those weeks off. If you had vacation in the summertime, it was all right. It worked out fine. But your wives, and some of them I went to work at 3:30 in the morning, some at 7:45 at night. Up here you went to work at 4 o'clock in the morning, and 7 something at night. So it was very difficult, but you made up for it on your days off.
How about Aubrey and Bill?
Well, love the 9 days off.
Yeah, and your wives?
Mostly I worked a 6-2-4-9, you know, and I had a quick turnaround, which meant I went to Albany 1:30 in the morning. I was back to work again at 5:30 and back into Boston just about 24 hours later. So it was nice for her. It wasn't so nice for the guys that went up and down. But no, you know, first of all, I got married after I had the job, and I went with her while I had the job. So it was kind of broken in slowly, you know. I'm not saying she ever enjoyed it, really, you know.
But she understood what she was getting into.
But what are you going to do? You're married.
Aubrey, was it difficult, your schedule?
Yes, it was. Because the week that I worked, I didn't have any time for anything else. I went to work at 9 o'clock at night on Washington Charlotte 34 in Lynchburg. Got here in D.C. at 1 o'clock. Stayed up at the Y in the open Union Station, and came back to work at 4 and worked till 8 o'clock in the station, and got off a train back in Lynchburg at noon. And then I had to sleep because I had to be back on a train at 9 o'clock because I ran 5 days in a row. So I didn't have to do time for anything except for sleep for that week. But then I was a 5 and 9, 5 days on, 9 off. And about every 3 months you had to work an extra week, you know, so the time would balance out. And then I ended up my career with going from Washington to Bristol, and 1 day and back the next, 3 round trips. So I was glad to, well, when they finally got to cut the trains off, you know, I was pleased to be home more, and it worked out fine for me. But yeah, it was a struggle at first.
How many of you worked extra jobs or second jobs on your long days off?
I did not.
Not.
Nope.
No?
Yeah, I worked part-time a little bit as a survey helper. When they built Smith Mountain Lake in the early 60s, a friend of mine ran a surveying company and asked me to work some for him. So that's what I did. But it wasn't, not very much, but enough to enjoy it. Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed doing it because I had plenty of time off.
What did you think about the pay, the pay as an RPO clerk once you were on as a regular? What do you think the pay compared to other jobs that were out there at the time?
Absolutely not.
Better or worse?
They weren't worse.
Worse.
Sure they were. It wasn't standard at the time. I mean, we did better than the post office. We were one level higher than a post office clerk, you know, for the same, you know, amount of work. But getting at is the pay was, we got by. You never had starved to death, but outside pay was more. There's no question. Until about 1972, then they started to catch up.
Feel the same way, Aubrey and Gayle, or?
Yes, for the most part. And I think we had 48-minute hours, didn't we? Mm-hmm. Because of the time off, we had to prepare exams to pass those.
We had that. I started out 75.5 cents an hour in 1944. I've seen somewhere the other day. But the pay...
Do you think that was fairly decent at the time?
Well, for a 17-year-old, I'd say yes.
True. I want to talk a little bit about the mail catch. You referred to it a little bit, catching the mail and tossing it off. Did you each have a chance to do that in your career? Once? Okay. How'd you do?
Too many times. No, actually, I think that I only did it once. It was kind of fading out, you know, when I was on. But I did have an experience where the fellow was going to show me how to do it. And he told me to get down one end. He's going to show me how to catch, you know, with the other end. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking out the window. Make a long story short, he missed the pouch and he lost his hat. I said, I got it down pat now exactly what you have to do. So that's about my only experience with catching mail. I didn't do it too much at all.
Yeah, it was a regular thing for me. Every trip was catching for me. The bad part about it was sometimes you too late getting to the door. You know, it's gone. It's gone. But for the most part, yeah, it was. It kind of scared me the first few times because when it hits that back thing, it's a little rubber bumper on the back of the swing arm, and it makes a pretty good loud noise when it catches. And as soon as it catches, you have to let the inside bar down because it may fall out. And of course, then you kick out. You got a pouch to kick out too. But it was fortunate in that it was mostly for small post offices that the train didn't stop. So it wasn't a lot of heavy mail type things. But yeah, it was. I did miss a few of them because you're in the car working all the time, see, and you go to the window and look, and you go back and work a little bit and look again, and you know you don't want to run by it, but inevitably you get working and tired with what you're doing, and sometimes it did happen that you would miss it.
Some clerks have mentioned the engineer would blow the whistle a couple of times. Did you not have that in your training?
No.
I've served about everything between here, Bristol and Washington. Now, there were some offices, I remember one, Salem, Virginia. They had 2 catchers, and they were located, less than a half a mile apart. Then we had 2, and I know in Southwest Virginia, Emory and Meadowview were only about a mile or 2 miles apart, and you had to lock one out, throw it out, catch it, dump it, lock it back up, throw the other out. You didn't have much time going 60, 70 miles an hour. How'd
you do on those?
Well, all right.
Did you ever miss one? Let's put it that way.
I've missed one. I threw one out and it flew back under the train one time. I had a lot of explaining to do there, too.
I was going to ask how your tossing skills were.
Well.
Did you ever hit anything you weren't supposed to hit?
Yeah. Sometimes you served officers you did not catch. If you were the first train of a morning, and 41, we had to serve everything from Charlottesville to Washington. And you'd lock out 8 or 10 pouches. Well, you get to the next stop station, you'd have extra pouch. You don't know what happened. But I said one time I'd quit before I'd do that again. I didn't quit, but I didn't do it again.
Oh, another
Did
good thing.
you ever hit anything that you shouldn't have hit, or miss something?
Sometimes you hit a car or something parked too close to track.
Oh, I was going to say about the mail catch. That was good in one respect, that if you had any misthrown mail that was going back the other way, you could throw it off there, because the next train coming north, or vice versa, you could expedite that mail. Yeah, there was no mail catch in Manassas, but I was a newspaper clerk and threw a sack of mail out. You know, it's heavy, big one. Unfortunately, I didn't kick it quite far enough. And I looked out the window like this, looked back and looked like chicken feathers, just mail, it was circling up, just going. I told the supervisor, but he said, well, it's too late now to do anything about it. So I was lucky enough, I never did anything about it, but that does happen sometimes. It gets sucked under the train if you don't push it out, kick it out far enough.
Yeah. Did you ever have any trouble? I know Gayle mentioned that the stations some of the cranes were so close together. Did you ever have that trouble on your run where you only had a mile or half a mile between any of the catches? Or
No.
You had a luxury of.
Yes. Yep.
So, Gayle, on yours, were you the only guy at that point who was making the catch and the throw?
Yes. Sometimes you would. They would have the next station ready for you to lock out, and all you had to do was just catch it, and they'd hand you the next station, because you did not have much time. But we only had two of them that were real close.
Were they when you were doing the catch and throw, were they all usually on the same side of the car, or did you have to switch sides once in a while?
These two were on the same side, but a lot of them you switched, and the station might be on one side, and the catcher might be, the pouch would be on the other side. Especially a double track between Washington and Lynchburg, or Washington and Roanoke was double track all the way.
Did you ever have any trouble where you were looking on the wrong side until it was too late?
No, but, yeah. No, I don't think so.
So you usually caught it pretty good, figured it out. What, of all the jobs that were on the train, the letter, the pouches, all of this, what was the absolute worst thing to do? You just dreaded and hoped it was the thing you didn't have to do on the car.
Probably have to say dumping up for, half the trip, dumping pouches. I mean, everybody had to pass down, everybody had to pile them up, or running late for about 6 or 7 hours wasn't exactly happy either. But that, actually, dumping up, but that was part of the job.
What made it not as much fun as anything else?
Excuse me?
What made dumping up less fun?
It was physical.
Not very mental, but physical.
You two agree that was the least favorite?
Yes, absolutely. But that's the job I started on as a regular job, so I had to do that for about 3 years. And yeah, that's where it is dusty, and some of those pouches are pretty heavy, and of course you had to open every one and look in the bottom of it, make sure you get everything out of it. But yeah, that was probably the least desirable job, yeah.
The most undesirable job that I encountered, they wanted new pouches to be put in circulation. They'd give them to you, and you'd hang your whole rack with new pouches, and that it was it was terrible. Locking out new pouches.
Because they just weren't supple and broken.
Oh, they had not, I mean, they were terrible.
How often did they do that to you?
Oh, you might catch it 2 or 3 times a year, but it was mean whenever it was.
Did you all do a pretty good job of getting everything done before the train pulled in? Did you all, it was all done by the time you got to the final station?
Certain trains you could do it. Some trains on a weekend, Sunday, if you went to Portland, Maine, especially the one I was on, you still wouldn't have finished, But there were certain trains it was, you weren't going to finish. It was, you knew that when you were leaving, But most of the time, yes, we cleaned up, Yeah, I'd say 90% of the time.
What happened to the trains that you didn't finish?
You put a little pouch label into somebody else and send it to Boston.
How about you guys? Did you usually finish up your cars?
Except the Monday after the big blackout that affected all of New England, New York, and what year, I don't even remember what year it was. We had a short crew, and we got everything from Portland, Maine, of 3 states we worked, Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee. And we did not finish that day.
Yeah, an effort.
I love that you remember the one time you didn't finish.
Yes.
Well, an effort was always made to get the next state done, so that that wouldn't be a problem. And on the Washington Charlotte 34, they worked everything from D.C. to Maryland, everything, even New York City. They worked New York City on this train, but they always made sure that they got Maryland and D.C. mail all done before we got to D.C. But a lot of times, New York State, New Jersey, they did not finish all that mail, but so we just put the label in it for New York and Washington. They worked it continuously, on up a line.
Let's talk. I mean, you had to know your schemes pretty darn well to finish all this stuff up. Let's start with you, Bill. Your schemes, what did you know? How many states or cities did you know by the end of your service?
All New England, 2/3 of New York, and Boston City would cover it. Yeah, that's what we had. On the B&A, that would cover everybody usually had that. Boston City you might skip, but most people got it.
You say 2/3 of New York?
Excuse me?
You said 2/3 of New York?
Yeah, well, the upper part of New York. You didn't get into Long Island around New York City and that part.
Okay.
That was on the shoreline. That was the Boston, New York trains. Took that. We were up more towards, Saratoga, up northern part of the state.
Okay. How about Aubrey? What did you have to know?
Well, Virginia was in 2 sections. I learned both sections of Virginia, A and B, East and West. Mm-hmm. And later in my career on the Railway Mail Service, I was a Virginia clerk on 45. And I learned Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Maryland, and the lower part of New York State.
Lower part, huh?
Long Island, Westchester County.
So you caught up where he left off.
Yeah.
You got
I worked Washington, Bristol 18. Coming north, I was the pouch man and the Maryland clerk and the New York State clerk. But I didn't always finish New York State. There was just 3 of us on that. It was a small RPO car and just 3 clerks. So it's a little different than when you have a 60-foot car and 12 employees that are working. So you can switch off and help a little bit more. So that's all I had. But that was a lot, I thought.
How about you, Gayle? What did you end up knowing?
Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Virginia, North Carolina, West Virginia, parts of Kentucky, Maryland, and I worked New Jersey on 18. My last scheduled exam was Baltimore. I got cut off before it, but the last one up was Louisiana. And we did work Baltimore and Philadelphia City, New York City, Washington, D.C. on some trains.
How much practice did you guys put in to know those? How much work did you put in your off hours to learn these schemes?
Well, when you first learned the scheme for the first time, you put in a few hours, you know, but if you got lucky enough to work the scheme you were studying, it helped. And then, you know, after you got repeats about every 3 years, you know. Sometimes you keep away from certain things. You could avoid certain things if you did the right jobs. You know, you didn't have to know them all.
And of course, it helped to have a great memory. I tried to memorize them first, but that didn't work. So I went to actually buying the cards and using the same process as when you go through the actual exam. And that worked real well for me. And I think I had one time, and every 9 months you had to put up another different exam every 9 months. And I had a string of about 9 in a row of 100. So after you learn how to do it and apply yourself to it, and of course you had to make yourself stick to it till you learned it and felt comfortable with it. So, and like he said, after you get it the first time, it's much easier the second time around. Sure. So worked out okay.
Yeah.
We did have little cases, cardboard cases, that you could practice on, you know. I had one of them. You know, my wife thought it was crazy, but I had it at home set up in like an easel.
Yeah,
and you know, you practice like that, sticking them in the little pigeonholes.
Yeah, I think that was pretty common.
Yeah.
And actually, I like to say one thing, that actually they would usually give you 100 cards, and you had a certain length of time to put them up, to put them all in there, and you had to get, I think, 97% accuracy.
97 was starting.
97% accuracy. So, and they could choose any 100 at random that they wanted. So you had to learn them all, which you did. And of course, I think a lot of guys took pride in the job and accuracy that they did in putting up exams. And Bill was talking about the slips, and what he meant by that is, after you got all your mail in, you were pulling down mail for, say, Lynchburg, you would pull all the mail out of that and you'd wrap it up, and you could wrap it pretty fast after you learned how to do it well. But on the back of the package, you would put a slip with your rubber stamp on it, your name, your date, the date and the train number and so forth. And when it arrived in Lynchburg, if this clerk who received it found errors in it, they would write you up, and you'd get a letter saying you had one letter wrong in this package right here. Would you please watch this and don't do this anymore? Blah blah blah. But that's what that was about. But
did you spend a lot of time practicing, Gayle?
Yes, he said that Virginia had 2 sections. It had 3 when I started. It had over 2,100 post offices, and also we were required to check an error a month. If you worked or not, I don't know how you'd check an error if you didn't work. But
So did you ever get that letter?
I've gotten a few too, but you better be particular. You better not be anybody you connect with, because he's going to get you next time.
So you all feel pretty good about your accuracy rates?
oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I went it all right. I mean, no problem, really. I mean, you usually were ready. If you were really going to take an exam, you were usually ready. I mean, I suppose there's some people could say I'm going to take a shot at it, but I thought I had it down pretty pat if I was going to do it. You know.
And even the one you might miss may be stuck together behind another card, you see, or even a letter for that matter. That happened pretty regularly.
Did you ever have a visit from an inspector who
That-
was just checking you up?
There used to be someone in the district offices would make inspection trips. On the latter years, they became inspectors. Some of them, the first time they'd been on train, they didn't know what they were doing. But I avoided them as much as I could, but you can't avoid somebody in a 30-foot car. He got me for not wearing goggles.
Really?
I think. He had to show something for his work out there. They had one inspection trip, and we had two guys, and one of them had left his gun at home. He sidled up to his, said, "You don't happen to have an extra gun with you, do you, Buck?" He carried two guns.
Did you two have any issues with inspectors, or
No.
remember
no,
them
not-
coming aboard and just checking everything out?
Yeah, I had inspectors on, and actually, most of them didn't know what was going on. I mean, you know, they might have known about robberies or something else, but when it comes to the railway mail, they were kind of lost. Except this one time, this man come on, and he says to me, you know, this is, you got to understand the mail. You had a pouch, Boston and Troy, and it said via star route number 6. And he says, that should be star route number 8. And I said to myself, this guy knows something. So actually, the man became the postmaster of New York City.
Oh, there you go.
So I guess he did know something. No, but it was funny. I said to the guys, watch out. He knows what he's talking about. But that was the only time that I ever seen an inspector really knew the routing and everything else, really. Yeah, the rest of them would, you could have told them anything.
One thing I've asked all the clerks is, I know when you've had your trips and stayed over, you've stayed in a lot of YW or YMCA's, you've stayed in a lot of maybe just regular old hotels, what have you. What's the worst place you ever had to spend the night while you were working on one of your trips?
Well, I spent a lot of nights on the bench in the railroad station because I had that quick turnaround, and sometimes if you were late, you only had 2 hours, so where are you going to go? Is you get on the bench and get very comfortable after a while. But that's about the worst I think we had, you know. I'm not saying some of the other places come close, but no, most of them were pretty good, you know.
Yeah, I didn't have that problem either. I had a room in Bristol that some of the guys rented. A bunch of us got together, and I think it was like 8 or 10, and rented a room that we all shared. Our schedules never conflicted, so it worked out pretty well.
And Gayle?
I stayed in some who are not number 1 rated, but nothing to complain about. This long ago.
It is a long time ago.
Yes.
Did any of you stay here in D.C.? Or,
yes.
Accommodations okay in Washington?
The MCA.
Yeah, the YMCA upstairs over the Union Station. Yeah.
Yeah,
Excuse me, go ahead.
Oh, one of the other clerks mentioned that the Y charged you a certain amount of money until they put in air conditioning, and they charged a little bit more. Was that something you ran into here?
I suppose so.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Don't remember.
No, one time we did own an apartment house up in Albany, New York, and we had 3 floors, and there was more beds and everything else, so we had the whole place, and we had a rec room. So that was pretty nice, except sometimes you get 3 or 4 guys in a room, and somebody would come in at 2 o'clock in the morning, kick shoes around. But no, I mean, it wasn't a bad, you know, the sheets were clean, and we had a rec room, and it was nice.
Now, you all had passes, is that correct, to ride back to Deadhead if you needed to?
Yes.
Was there ever an occasion where you got to use or wanted to use that pass for something that wasn't necessarily just going on a deadhead, but to take a trip? Did you ever get a chance to do that?
No, I never did do
that. Was
that.
that completely illegal?
Well, it wasn't illegal. I came up here to see the superintendent one time, but that was official business, and I never used it for any other purpose, no, that I can recall.
Was that something they told you never ever to do, or it never came up to just take a trip on your pass?
Yeah.
For the most part, no. I'd say no. We didn't really.
You had enough train travel. You didn't want any
That's
extra.
right.
You didn't want to get back in on your days off?
No.
Well, when you say take a trip, do you mean like a vacation?
Yeah.
Oh, no. I mean, I might have used it on the Boston and Troy because we were deadheading up or something, you know. but it was just good for the B&A, but they never bothered you. But, and take a vacation, I wouldn't even think about it, no.
It's too much like work, right?
Well,
Getting back on that train.
I wouldn't want to lose my job on account of one vacation.
Very true. How many of you worked registry as well as at one time?
I have.
You have? Did Aubrey? Bill,
No,
did
I
you?
never did
Yeah,
work
I
with.
worked
You worked
yeah.
registry? What would you say if you knew, what was the most interesting thing you carried by most interesting or valuable thing you think you carried by registry mail?
The most?
Interesting or valuable?
Well, the biggest thing we had was what they call an 83. And if you look up in Boston, there's the old zones. You'll never find out what 83 is because it was a Federal Reserve Bank. And we used to get a lot of the bank deposits from the, different places. And they were pretty good size amounts of money. They were marked 83s, that's what you call them. They would meet the cars with shotguns when the train come in. They would escort you to a truck with shotguns, and they would get in the truck with you until you were up the GPO building in Boston. And thank God they signed off and you could go home, Yeah, then we had a lot of money at first. Yeah, we did. And I've seen coins sometimes break right in half the cars that used to load the mail cars, and put so much in the middle the coins just broke. What scared me is those same coins were inside these cars and they only had wooden floors. I'm saying someday that could break through too. But we never had that happen. But yeah, we had a lot of money at one time.
What would you be carrying?
Federal Reserve money from here to Memphis, also Federal Reserve in Birmingham. There was a coin shortage one time, and Philadelphia sent a bunch of money, coins to Birmingham, and loaded it in the car. It was uneven. The springs, whatever, that storage car. And we caught it later on. It was still uneven. It never did bounce back.
It's a lot of coins.
I wasn't a register clerk, but yeah, I was on the same train runs that he was speaking of. The Federal Reserve would send the money to Memphis, and it must have been, I don't know, 35 pouches of all new money. And
paper money.
Yeah, and they were about 2.5 feet long by 2 feet wide. And of course, we didn't know the denominations. They could have been hundreds or ones. But I expect it was a pretty good amount of money. But we only had, there's just one register clerk had a pistol, and the foreman carried a pistol, didn't he?
Well, everybody did up until later on.
Yeah.
One of those shipments going to Memphis, the guy from Chattanooga to Memphis had piled them in the door in the summertime. He got to Memphis, he was short a bag. He had some explaining to do on his 30-day suspension. The inspectors, I think, walked the track and they found it. But
It was just sitting out by the side of the track? Or?
yeah, it fell out. Why you would?
Goodness gracious. One thing I've also discovered with the clerks is that there's a lot of pranking and jokes going on in the cars from time to time. Were any of you, or do any of you know of a prank or your favorite prank that you've heard of or maybe played or was played on while you were a clerk? Oh, you've got one, Bill. You just don't know whether to tell it or not.
None for television.
Oh, dear.
I'll take the fifth.
I know the same person I was talking about a while ago who asked for the extra gun. They came out of Bristol on December the 23rd. It was raining. Rain turned to snow and ice. They got back to Bristol Christmas Eve. And he couldn't unlock his car. He's covered with ice and snow. And he asked the other guy if he had anything to pry open the door. He said, I've got a tire tool. So he went and tried to pry up the car, couldn't get it. And he says, isn't there something you can buy? And it was that you can spray on there or melt that. And he said, yeah. And they went out West Bristol, found one service station open, come back, and while he was there, he said, Sam said, Jack, you got any money? He said, where's yours? He said, it's my suitcase. The suitcase is back sitting up in the parking lot. They sprayed the door, and he said, it's changing the color of my car. And he said, this ain't my car. He had a head full of all the cars, and he didn't know it. I laughed at seeing the guy that owned the car to come by and him breaking it.
Now we're running, going to be running a little bit late, and the party's starting here, so I want to let you go to that. So I'll just have one last question for everybody, and that's if you had one thing that you want to make sure the public knows about the Railway Mail Service or the RPO clerks, what would it be?
We weren't part of the UPS. That's the first thing. We weren't the Railway Mail, the Railway Express, which everybody thought when you sold it, you must have been, you work for the railroad or you work for the express company.
Yeah.
They just didn't understand you were part of the post office. It really was kind of a problem. You know, they really didn't think you worked for the post office. You were someone else. But, and they couldn't understand all the time you had off. You know, that was, you know, how do you do that? How do you guys get paid that money? What do you do for that kind of money, you know? That was about the biggest things, I'd say, you know.
I think they, for the most part, most of the guys were very conscientious and liked to do a good job, and were top of the line people, I thought. And the camaraderie of the group and how everyone helped each other, and we worked more as a team rather than individuals. And it was a very good place to work. I enjoyed it a lot.
The long hours and the hard work, the dirty work we did. I don't know whether people appreciated it or not, but I remember enjoyed it.
Well, people know about that now.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you
Thank
very,
you.
very much.
Thank you.